All right, what about prescription drugs? Because now we're looking at basically three elements that can kind of screw up your brain and your ability to make good decisions. And that is alcohol, marijuana, or, you know, illicit drugs. And then, of course, prescription drugs that for a long time we haven't really paid that much attention to.
We arrest a lot of DUIs during the day, and they're mostly females, and they're under the influence of prescribed drugs. But they're just not taken appropriately. That is the majority of our DUIs during the day are not alcohol, they are prescription drug related. And I don't think our community is any different than any others across the state.
And we have had serious injuries and fatalities related to impaired driving due to prescription drugs here locally in the Tri-Cities. So it's not something that is happening in King County or Pierce County or some faraway place. It's happening right here in our home, in our backyard.
What would be, oh, sorry, Christine, I was just going to say, for the listeners out there, maybe you can elaborate what is referred to by prescription drugs. What are some of the drugs that you're seeing people that maybe they're confused about the dosage or they don't follow the label directions? What are some of the drugs that you're referring to specifically?
So the painkillers, drugs that help people sleep, help with anxiety, help with depression, all those can, if they're, especially if they're overused or combined with other drugs or combined even with a little bit of alcohol, can make a person extremely impaired.
So how do they behave? How do you as law enforcement recognize that as a impaired driver? What are they doing?
Generally in those situations with the prescription drugs, it's just slowed response. So the slurred speech, they're just not making appropriate responses when you ask them questions. And of course their driving is, their reactions are slow under the influence of those drugs. And we typically see, when we see the blood results, it is a multitude of drugs. It's not just one. Polydrug use, whether it's marijuana or it's prescription drugs and alcohol is just one factor of this. We typically see a multitude, a cocktail, if you will, of stuff in their blood.
That's interesting. You know, I have referred to it a couple of times this week already, Lattin, the Kennewick police briefing. But I read this thing, it's just so entertaining, it's sad. But here, let me share one of the stops by an officer. There was a complaint called 911, complainant called 911 to report a DUI driver. He had been following the suspect vehicle through Canyon Lakes and had observed it strike a curb. The suspect vehicle pulled into the parking lot and then left almost immediately, returning into the Canyon Lakes neighborhood. The vehicle struck another curb and then drove eastbound in the westbound lanes, divided by center median at entrance near the golf course. The vehicle then stopped in the middle of the street, and the female driver got out and began walking. The sergeant contacted the female. She was wearing one slipper and was highly intoxicated. They attempted to do the field sobriety tests. She couldn't complete any of them. She was arrested and booked. So I mean, it's, you know, anybody's going to be arrested.
And this is not, you know, we're not talking about bad people, we're not talking about criminals. It's just, they're good people that made bad choices. That's what we're talking about.
So it's interesting to me that what you're focusing on now, which I think is smart and a good strategy, is how do you convince people to make different decisions? Not when they're intoxicated, but when they're straight, when they're sober. How do you do that?
Well, I think one of the ways is you try to make it personal for each individual. For me, I try to think of my family. When you take the more than 500 fatalities, and if you brought them all into our community and think about the fact that the average graduating class at our local high schools are about 800 students in each class. And if you took that 500 students or people and put it into that one high school graduating class, and you would have 3 out of every 4 graduating students never graduate. And to me, that makes it personal, because I have a grandson that's a senior in high school, and that's how I make it personal for me. Other people, you ask them, okay, what's an acceptable number? In the state of Washington, what's an acceptable number for fatalities related to impaired driving? And you'll get a random selection of numbers. But then ask them, what's the number for your family? How many people out of your family are you willing to lose to impaired driving? The number's 0.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds like an adult strategy, which I think would be better than the PSA that we heard just a while ago, that, as John was saying, talked about, hey dude, and stuff like that.
Yes.
We need to be talking to an adult audience, I think. Anyway, we're going to be back in a moment. I want to hear what happens when you get pulled over. We're back in a moment. One of our guests here today, Mike Aldridge, was just talking about that the Washington Traffic Safety Commission was getting some feedback. So give them our feedback, would you? Tell them, I want to listen to someone who has made a decision that now regrets it. And because that is the position that I would be in if I were a driver. It would help me make a pre-decision. Here's another person that caused harm to somebody else, and they would take it back if they could, and they regret their decision, and this is how it affected their life. So, take that to them, would you?
I will do that.
And also, we were talking during the break, I don't see them as much anymore, but some very effective ones were where they showed the home movies of the people, and you see a family or a father or mother, someone having fun, or especially a little child, and then they come on with the characters on the screen and say so-and-so was killed by a drunk driver, and they give the date. That hits you right to the
Yeah,
balls.
it does.
Making it personal.
And you know, you almost, in today's society where people get so desensitized, you almost have to create a moment, like we were saying. Nobody will ever forget the opening 20 or 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan.
Right.
You need to create that type of a searing impact in someone's psyche so that they will never think about, seriously about getting behind the wheel of a car when they're impaired. And it's sad, but sometimes you almost have to go over the top to get through to people.
Right, and that was one of the topics of discussion at the recent Target Zero Partners meeting held over in Olympia, trying to identify exactly how do we get the message across to the widest audience possible.
Right. All right, so what happens to you when you get pulled over?
So immediately, when you see the red and blue lights flash, the officer's going to come up and the investigation has started. So obviously they know that something is up based on what they've seen in your driving. Then they were asking you for your license, registration, insurance, things you need to provide. Looking to see if your speech is slurred, if your eyes are watery, if your finger dexterity is off, if you're having trouble getting that license out of your wallet. Those are all indicators that we've got some sort of a problem or some sort of impairment. Then they're going to be offered the chance to perform what we call roadside field sobriety tests. They're optional, but this gives you a chance to prove either you're sober or you're impaired. We're looking for signs in the eyes. We're looking for finger dexterity. We're looking for balance, being able to track time, things like that become very difficult when you're impaired. At that point, if the officer feels that you are impaired, you'll be put under arrest, taken to jail, given the opportunity to blow in the breathalyzer machine. When we sign our driver's license, that's called implied consent, meaning that we promise the state of Washington, by carrying this driver's license, that if I'm stopped and pulled over and under investigation for impaired driving, that I will submit to a breath test. If it appears there's not alcohol on board, then we can take you to the hospital and we apply for a telephonic search warrant. Call a judge, explain the circumstances, they give us authorization to take that person's blood. So it's a very time-consuming process, but it's very, very accurate. And in the end, it's going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of embarrassment when you have to explain why you can't come to work tomorrow because you're still in jail on an 8-hour sobriety hold.
Now, is that the type of thing that they do with the marijuana testing, is the blood draw, if someone is suspected? Because I'm sure that, if someone, the breathalyzer, obviously alcohol, but with marijuana, you still see the signs of impairment, but the breathalyzer doesn't work on that, correct?
Correct. So the breathalyzer only works on alcohol. So everything else we have to take to the hospital and draw blood.
Yeah, interesting, but then doesn't marijuana stay in your system for a while, so how fairly accurate is that?
So it changes. The active THC is immediate, but your body processes that very quickly and becomes THC carboxy, which is what stores in your fat cells and can stay there for a long time. And so we can test that as well, and obviously we get convictions on what we call carboxy, which means that stored THC that's been transferred and is now just being stored in your body.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, the bottom line is drive sober, or you'll get pulled over. I mean, yeah. I don't know how many times can we say it, but I mean we've been saying it for decades here. All right, I want to move on to another subject before we run out of time here, and that happens to be that more people are seeking concealed weapon permits following mass shootings, as law enforcement has witnessed this many times before. Sergeant Lattin, what does a concealed weapons permit allow someone to do? I mean, I have to tell you, I'm totally and completely ignorant about this. What does it allow someone to do?
So to carry, for example, a handgun in the state of Washington, you could open carry, which just means you strap it to your waist and everybody can see it. It's not concealed. It's as long as you're not a convicted felon, you can carry in places that don't prohibit that.
Mm-hmm.
The other option is to carry concealed, meaning you have a loaded firearm on your person, but it's concealed, it's hidden. To have that, you have to have a permit, which means they'll go through the fingerprint process, send it off to Olympia, make sure you are who you say you are, make sure you don't have any disqualifications, so felony convictions, any domestic violence convictions, mental health issues, things of that nature that would disqualify you.
And that's only for carrying it on my person?
Correct.
Or does not involve carrying it in my vehicle?
So in your vehicle, if it's going to be on your person and you're going to conceal it, you need to have the permit. If you're going to open carry, it's just open, like carrying on your hip. That's okay. But you know, if you're just storing it in your vehicle, it really needs to be unloaded in your vehicle. It's not on
okay.
you.
All right. How is Kennewick Police Department, for example, meeting this demand?
Yeah, and the citizens of Kennewick, we've seen this over and over after any sort of national tragedy. They have an increased demand for wanting to have the ability to protect themselves. And so typically we have just one day a week, a half a day on Fridays, where we'll do the fingerprinting. That's the time-consuming part. But due to the demand after San Bernardino tragedy, we added Thursday. So today and of course next Thursday we'll have all day, in addition to the half day on Fridays, to try and process all the requests that the citizens have.
Because we had a story on our website, newstalk870.am. I saw the information you sent out very shortly after the incidents in San Bernardino. I believe you said that you had 38 applications in one day. Now, is that close to or a record, or is that a typical?
I don't know if we track records on that, but it was definitely an anomaly, because we're averaging about 60 a month, and so to have 38 in one day was quite an anomaly, and obviously it followed immediately following the San Bernardino attack.
Mm-hmm. Again, who cannot get one?
So convicted felons, if you have any sort of felony conviction,
Okay.
anybody who's been convicted of any sort of domestic violence situation, crime, would be disqualified. Then you have to be a U.S. citizen, or there's a way for a qualified alien to get one, but generally a U.S. citizen. And then anybody with mental health issues, so you've been, incarcerated at a mental health facility, things like that, or documented that the person has mental health issues. So they're trying to check that database to make sure that the guns don't get into the wrong hands.
So you could, if you had mental health issues, you could carry openly, but you couldn't carry concealed?
Not necessarily, but we're just talking about concealed weapon. You'd be able to get that permit. You would not be able to carry concealed if you had those type of issues. But if you legally possessed the gun and you were open carrying, we'd have to have some other sort of articulable information to say why you should be having that gun right now.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're talking about significant issues that the person might have, such as if they were, as you said, incarcerated, or in a qualified clinical opinion, the person has behaviors that could be harmful to themselves or others. We're talking significant.
Major, I would
Yes.
hope anyway.
Significant
Yeah,
issues
uh-huh.
here.
Yeah. Does that concern law enforcement at all?
So we're obviously in support, of people's constitutional right to bear arms, and that is okay. We want law-abiding citizens to be able to carry if they choose to. And so our responsibility in law enforcement is just to make sure that we're following the process as prescribed by law, and help facilitate that process as quickly as possible if they're applying for a permit. We don't necessarily think it's bad for law-abiding citizens to carry. I think that when you look at people who are trying to do terrorist acts or trying to attack people in whatever way, they're always looking for soft targets. They are cowards. They don't want to go someplace where they're going to meet resistance. And as soon as they do meet resistance, when law enforcement arrives, they either quit, they kill themselves, or they allow themselves to be killed by the police because they don't want to meet any sort of resistance. So I think that an armed, law-abiding person does provide a level of security for them.
Is there any concern on law enforcement that more people might be encouraged to get guns or concealed weapons that don't take into account some basic common sense responsibilities of gun ownership?
Yeah, that's the second piece of that puzzle. Is we strongly encourage people to you've got to search your soul. You've got to know whether you could take another person's life. To protect your own life, to protect somebody else's life, could you? Because that's the only purpose that gun has, is to take a life. It's not to threaten people, it's not to intimidate people, it's to protect yourself, which means taking a life. So you got to search yourself, can you do that? And then number two, make sure you get some training on gun handling, using it, be proficient. You don't want to be carrying something that you've never even shot. So go to the range, get some professional training, there's plenty of that out there. Take advantage of that so you're qualified.
Be smart.
I've seen that that issue raised multiple times, that if people want to consider a gun, they really should learn how to shoot it. And that it just seems basic.
It seems basic. It's just like driving a car. You need to learn to drive the car before you take off and go to the store.
Yeah. All right, we'll be back in a moment here on Meet in the Middle. Stay with us. Hey, my guest today, Sergeant Ken Lattin with the Kennewick Police Department, and Michael Aldridge with Target Zero. He's the manager of that program. He's a former captain, retired now from the Pasco Police Department. If you have any questions or you want to make any comments about concealed weapons, hey, this would be the time, 547-8726, or really about any of the topics that we discussed today. Or, let me tell you, if you got a random thought, go ahead. So what kinds of things are you seeing right now, Sergeant, in terms of activities in Kennewick? Anything in particular kind of jump out at you?
So the big thing we have during the holiday season is gift cards in the mail. We see a lot of mail theft. People are leaving the Christmas cards, and they all know Christmas cards usually contain gift cards. So we'll see that some mail theft. And then, of course, the big thing here lately is the packages being left on the doorstep. We had a $900 Traeger barbecue taken earlier in the week. It had only been there, according to the victim, 2 hours. Another package last night was taken. So it's an every night thing. So it's so important. If you're having packages delivered, make sure somebody's there. Make sure you sign up with whether it's UPS, FedEx, or U.S. Postal Service for the text alerts, so you know exactly when it's been dropped off, so you can be right there to get it. It's so important.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah. Just seems crazy. I mean, crime oftentimes is just simply availability, isn't it? The door is open. Yeah, yep. Wow. All right, we've got a caller on the line. Let's go ahead and add this person to our conversation. Hi, you're on the air with us. Pretty good.
So if we're talking about private places, as you described, it's going to be a trespass as far as we're concerned. They've asked you to leave with the weapon or go put the weapon away, you refuse, it would be a trespassing issue. If we're talking about government buildings like the court, then you could be looking at actually criminal charges for bringing a weapon in there. Yeah, the business would have to ask you to leave or put the weapon away, and if you refuse, then it would be a trespassing issue.
So is that only if a business posts that information?
Any business, they have the right to ask anybody to leave.
Oh, yes, but I mean...
It's their property.
Yeah.
So if they know that you're carrying, whether it's an open carry or concealed, if they ask you to leave, then you can. You haven't committed a crime at that point. But when you refuse, then you're trespassing.
All right. Back to the packages. So this is an interesting trend that our society is going through right now in terms of doing more shopping online and having items delivered to our doorstep, and they often sit there waiting for people to get home or whatever. That seems really, really dangerous.
Yeah,
That seems
in-
counterproductive.
In some cases, the thieves are actually following the trucks.
Yeah.
Because they know these are packages.
And
These are-
especially now.
Yeah, like that gentleman that was just arrested, excuse me, a lot of people, a lot of traffic on Facebook about that 20-year-old guy that, understand, Kennewick nabbed him in Pasco, he was booked in Pasco, but he was following the UPS trucker.
Right. Yeah, just opportunistic. Using their powers for evil instead of good, I guess.
Yes. Okay, so the other thing that I noticed, and we had some folks in from domestic violence yesterday, is that the last report seemed to have quite a few domestic violence calls, and they were not just boyfriend-girlfriend type thing or husband-wife. They were mother-daughter, father-son, all kinds of arrangements of people. The holidays also seem to increase tension, and sometimes that seems to come out violence between people like that. Domestic violence.
Yeah, so there's increased tension, and then you add to that, many times holiday festivities can include alcohol, so that adds to it. People's filter disappears, and so they say something to a loved one they probably shouldn't have. And yeah, so the holiday season can be a much busier time, a much tragic time for families because of domestic violence.
You know, the other thing that just always intrigues me is why people would go holiday shopping and leave their packages sitting in the back seat. Oh, people, don't do that.
You might as well
Talk
write
about
steal me on the back.
opportunity.
Yeah, because people think nothing bad is ever going to happen to them, and so those other people get stuff stolen from them, and it's true of everything. But yes, we encourage you, if when you leave it, lock it. If you're putting stuff in your car, keep it out of sight. Put it in the trunk. Put it under a blanket. Something so thieves are opportunistic. They're looking for the easy stuff that's unlocked, stuff that's just readily there. They're not going to search in a car looking for something. They're going to get into the car knowing what's already there.
All right.
They're going to see it and then, okay, because, you know, if they're out at the mall or a store, they're not going to have a lot of time because somebody's going to see them trying to rummage through your car. So if they see it, then they go after it.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, I really enjoyed talking with you today, and perhaps let's think about doing a PSA. I'm going to volunteer Town Square Media, and I think that we could build a more effective public service announcement for not drinking and driving or not driving intoxicated. Don't you think?
Sounds good. We'll help
Yeah.
you with
I
that.
think you're
Community
right.
services.
I just volunteered John. Thank you, John. Woo! All right. Hey, we're back in a moment here. Stay with us.